When Abaddon ascended to command of the sons of Horus, not every warrior of the 16th Legion swore allegiance to him. Many traitors clung to their worship of Horus as a god, believing he would return to lead them and punish those who had forsaken their oaths. Others saw the Horus heresy as the end of their subservience to gods and masters. The Emperor and their Primarch were the last overlords they would ever bow to, and they saw no reason to make an exception for Abaddon. Most of these renegades were gradually lost to the warp, disappearing into the Eye of Terra and vanishing from record, though some prospered and would later return to challenge Abaddon. One such splinter warband was the Sons of the Eye, led by Drakarth the Sightless. A former battle brother of Abaddon, Drakarth had been one of Horus's captains, escaping in the chaos after Maelium fell. Abaddon heard whispers of Drakarth's escape and treachery from his cabal of chaos sorcerers, who also claimed that an old ally would one day rise to subvert the Black Legion, twisting its loyalty with the memory of the dead Primarch. Under the guise of a truce, Abaddon made a pact with the Sons of the Eye and allied with them during the 6th Black Crusade in the year 901 of the 36th millennium. Abaddon wanted to make an example of the Sons of the Eye, a dire warning to anyone who would challenge his power, but he needed to set the stage for his vengeance just right so that none would ever doubt his resolve. During the 6th Black Crusade, Abaddon besieged the Imperial Forge world of Arkreach, offering Drakarth and his Sons of the Eye an equal share of the plunder. For solar months, the two forces of Chaos Space Marines fought side by side against the defences of the Adeptus Mechanicus, bombarding their great forge cities from space. Finally, the traitors stood triumphant in the smouldering ruins of the great Manufactoria, dead littering the ground. As Drakarth extended his hand in greeting, Abaddon grasped it with his own, only to thrust the claws of the Talon of Horus into his fellow Chaos Space Marine's gut. Drakarth lived long enough to see the Sons of the Eye bow to Abaddon and be reabsorbed into the Black Legion before the War Master of Chaos tore out his skull and spine. Thus Abaddon delivered a dire warning to any who dared challenge his power. As the bloodshed of the First Black Crusade reached its peak, cities burned, and worlds were stripped of people to feed the dark desires of the traitor legions. Leaving his Black Legion to continue their brutal reprisals and raids against Imperial worlds, Abaddon pursued his own plans. Using the howling souls unleashed into the warp by so much death and destruction, he made a secret demonic bargain. In payment for the feast of despair, pain and anguish Abaddon had created with his Black Crusade, the Dark Gods gifted him the knowledge of the secret location of the Tower of Silence on the world of Uralan. Cloaked in the shadow of the Eye of Terra, Uralan was whispered of in demonic lore as a place where the gods themselves locked away their secrets. Following strands of fate unravelled by his cabal of chaos sorcerers, Abaddon discovered a concealed path through the warp and across the shifting sea of worlds beyond to reach Uralan without needing to breach the Cadian Gate. With a cadre of the Black Legion's elite warriors, each a brutal veteran of 1,000 battles, Abaddon set foot on Uralan and entered the Tower of Silence. Almost at once the tower's guardians set upon them ancient constructs of dark energy that shifted and flickered, their claws tearing at the ragged edges of his warriors' souls. After a bitter battle, Abaddon climbed down into the mirrored heart of Uralan. There, he wandered the massive haunted labyrinth for what seemed an age, fighting off the spirits of the dead that threatened to add him to their ranks. Eventually, Abaddon made his way to the centre of the labyrinth, where a shard of shifting darkness hung suspended in the air. Reaching into the void, Abaddon felt the cold hilt of a blade meet his palm, and he pulled it into reality. The demon's word Draconian took terrible shape before his eyes. After acquiring the malefic sword, Abaddon's power swelled to inhuman proportions, and the new War Master of Chaos became nigh unstoppable. Whole cities were burned in sacrifice to the ever-hungry demons of chaos, and entire armies were torn apart by gibbering warp entities. Abaddon's power grew as the gods of chaos rewarded him lavishly, and he undertook acts of fiendish bravery that horrified his enemies. Infused with the might of chaos, the Black Legion gained power and glory during the First Black Crusade. Under Abaddon's command, they seized numerous victories and triumphs, their actions washing away some of the memories of the Horus heresy and their great defeat before the Emperor's palace. Despite the reckless carnage and terrible destruction it caused, the First Black Crusade eventually ended. The Imperium had gathered its newly founded Space Marine chapters and Titan legions to counter the traitors. Even so, scores of worlds were silenced forever, and millions of slaves were dragged, screaming back into the eye of Terra. Abaddon had tested the defences of his enemies and vastly increased his power with the demon's word Draconyen. He also claimed the title of War Master of Chaos, rising to take all that Horus had once possessed. None within the Black Legion disputed Abaddon's right to the title, as the First Black Crusade proved his worthiness to lead. For the Black Legion, their first foray out of the Eye of Terror restored their position among the traitor legions, earning them grudging respect. If nothing else, Abaddon had proven the Dark God's favour, something even the demon Primarchs could not ignore. Conflict still sputtered and flared between the traitor legions, but they now had a new purpose, almost forgotten since the fall of Horus. Following the First Black Crusade, a period of constant raiding of Imperial space began. Abaddon allowed Black Legion warlords and their warbands the chance to make a name for themselves, giving them the freedom to strike where and when they chose. He fostered this independence on one condition: the atrocities they committed must be done in the name of the Black Legion and at the cost of the Emperor. Starting with the First Black Crusade, 13 times has Abaddon the Despoiler led the Black Legion in a grand assault against the Imperium. Every time, the Despoiler and his hordes have achieved a great victory, slain millions of loyalists or completed some obscure objective before vanishing back into the Eye of Terror. At the close of the 41st millennium, Abaddon led his 13th Black Crusade in the final conquest of Cadia, emerging stronger than ever before at the head of a vast army of traitors, heretics and demons. First, pacification of Luna. This early Imperial campaign was the first operation involving elements of the nascent Space Marine legions beyond Terra. During the ongoing unification wars on Earth, Luna served as the stronghold for a coalition of resurrectionist gene cults. These cults believed that human nature was fractal, fractured and transcendent, and each adhered to different archetypes. Cult members were products of the Selena gene rights creations, formulated during the Dark Age of technology. Continuously resurrected, they sought to embody the purest form of a single human archetype. In their powerful subterranean complexes, these cults were insular and resistant to the Imperial truth. Normally, the Imperials would obliterate such resistant factions, but the Selenar gene cults possessed something the Imperium needed. When the Selenar responded to Imperial offers with silence and began preparing for war, the Emperor ordered Luna's pacification. He deployed the 7th, 13th and 16th Legions, later known as the Imperial Fists, Ultramarines and Lunar Wolves, to carry out the task. The 16th Legion led the vanguard, approaching Luna silently and striking like a dagger in the night. Within 6 hours, Luna was brought into Imperial compliance. The surviving Selenar cultists surrendered, asking the Emperor to call off his wolves. The gene rights of Luna were enslaved to help forge the next generation of Space Marines, and the 16th Legion earned their name, the Lunar Wolves. Hunting of the Akharith, also known as bone drinkers, were parasitic fungoid life forms operating as interwoven gestalt blooms. These predators slowly siphon nutrition from living animals, primarily human bone marrow. Technologically uncreative, the Akharith inhabited scavenged void ships and raided isolated colonies. Initially encountered in the early Great Crusade, they were subjected to extermination by the Lunar Wolves and the 8th Legion, later known as the Night Lords. Despite these efforts, some marrow blooms survived. By the year 986 of the 30th millennium, reports indicated the Akharith were again attacking isolated outposts. The Alpha Legion, newly reunited with their Primarch, was tasked with their xenocide. Over a 3-year campaign, The Bone Drinkers were all but wiped out. Fall of Rhylis. For the first 30 years after his discovery, Horus Lupercal frequently fought alongside the Emperor. At the fortified city of Rhylis, which resisted the Imperial truce, defenders used secret tunnels to infiltrate the besieging Imperial army, swamping the command encampment with hundreds of shock troops. Unprepared and unarmored, the Emperor and Horus fought back-to-back until a plasma blast stunned Horus, knocking him to the ground. The Emperor stood over his fallen son, refusing to give ground until reinforcements arrived to drive back the attackers. The Goro Hollowing. Within the Telon Reach lay an Orc empire comparable to that of Olanor, with the scrap world of Goro at its centre. Dominated by the Mech Boys, the Orc tech caste, Goro boasted a unique plasma technology capable of generating terrifyingly potent destructive yields. This technology had significantly hindered the Great Crusade's advance in the Telon Reach. The Emperor decreed Goro's destruction. When a 1,000-strong fleet of warships emerged from the warp above Goro, it was the Emperor himself who ordered the assault. Horus, the dutiful and favoured son, stood by the Emperor's side as tens of thousands of assault craft launched from the fleet. The lunar wolves teleported beneath the planet's surface, hollowing out Goro from within due to its resistance to orbital bombardment. Leading the vanguard, the Emperor, Horus, and a guard of black-armoured Justarin Terminators from the Lunar Wolves' first company, alongside golden-clad Legiones Custodes, faced nearly overwhelming Orc resistance. The Orcs of Goro were massive and heavily augmented with bionics, some towering over dreadnoughts and wielding weapons that easily burned through power armour. At the battle's peak, the Emperor was momentarily separated from his guards and faced hundreds of Orcs alone, until a blast from an Orc plasma weapon weakened him, allowing an Orc leader to seize him. Horus stormed through the fray, severing the Orc's arms with a single blow. Together, father and son led their forces deeper into the scrap world until reaching the center, where the Emperor collapsed the self-sustaining plasma sphere that powered the planet, causing Goro to implode into the warp. This victory forged an unusually close bond between the Emperor and Horus, closer than that between any other Primarch and their father. War in the Shedim Drifts. During the war in the Shedim Drifts against the marauding Eldar of Craftworld Moriohi, a vast Imperial force comprising 4 Titan legions, Legio Atarus, Legio Mortis, Legio Fureans and Legio Osidax, was assembled under the command of Horus Lupercal and his Lunar Wolves Legion. The apocalyptic battle saw a demi-legio of Legio Atarus encircled and nearly destroyed, used by Horus as a diversion without their foreknowledge or consent. This tactic drew the enemy's strength away from their craft world, allowing the Lunar Wolves to launch a surprise assault. The war in the Shedim Drifts was a significant victory for Horus and the Imperium, though it came at the expense of the Legio Atarus, an injury they would not forget. Castigation of Terentius. Upon entering the Ordoni cluster, the Great Crusade encountered the formidable warlord Vataligeron Terentius. Observing the overwhelming forces against him, Terentius surrendered to the Imperium. The Great Crusade offered him opportunities and riches, and he rose to power, conquering worlds around the halo stars in the Emperor's name. However, Terentius eventually turned against the Imperium, conquering compliant planets and establishing his empire. In response, Horus and the Lunar Wolves were sent to crush the rebellion. Horus requested support from his brother Primarchs, bringing the Night Lords, Iron Hands and Alpha Legion into the fray. The rebel forces were soon fragmented, and the Lunar Wolves annihilated Terentius's command fleet. Horus personally led an assault on Terentius's flagship, killing him and ending his rebellion. Horus then ordered the Night Lords to decimate every world within Terentius's rebel empire, bringing swift and brutal retribution. Compliance of Molech, the Lunar Wolves participated in the massive Imperial compliance campaign on the newly discovered night world of Molech, led by the Emperor himself, and involving multiple Legiones Astartes, including the Dark Angels, Emperor's Children, and White Scars, as well as thousands of Imperialis Auxilia troops and Mechanicum and Legio Titanicus assets. After achieving victory, Cyprian Divine of House Divine was named planetary governor of Molech. In the presence of several Primarchs, the Emperor led them to a hidden warp portal, entering the realm of chaos to parley with the ruinous powers. Upon his return, the Emperor appeared aged but more powerful. He then suppressed his son's memories of Molech and stationed a large garrison force to protect the secrets of the warp portal. Compliance Davin, the feral world of Davin, codified as 63-8, was the 8th world brought into Imperial compliance by the 16th Legion's 63rd Expeditionary Fleet, approximately 60 standard years before the Horus heresy. The indigenous feral warriors attempted to resist the Imperium, but were overwhelmingly outmatched by the Astartes. Impressed by their courage and willingness to adapt to Imperial culture, Horus allowed the warrior tribes to remain mostly intact. The campaign was brief, and the Lunar Wolves departed after the Davinites' surrender, adopting the concept of the warrior lodge throughout their fleet. The 17th Legion, the Word-Bearers, then Imperial Heralds, under First Captain Cor Pharaon, was left to guide the Davinites towards the Imperial truth. Imperial governorship was given to Commander Eugen Temba of the Imperial Army, a close friend of Horus. Long after the 63rd Expeditionary Fleet departed, the inhabitants of Davin's moon refused Imperial rule, leading to Temba and his garrison being corrupted by the Davinite shamans of chaos and falling under the influence of the plague god, Nurgle. Unknown to the Imperium, Davin's population had long served the dark gods of the warp. This corruption would necessitate the return of the Lunar Wolves 60 years later and contribute to Horus's eventual corruption. Compliance of Tithonus. The Lunar Wolves fought an unidentified Xenos adversary while bringing Tithonus into Imperial compliance. This action involved a lengthy siege of the Xenos fortress states. Horus tasked the masters of the Forge world of Diamat to create massive siege machines capable of devastating powerful fortifications. However, these war machines took much longer to complete than anticipated. By the time they were finished, the campaign on Tithonus had ended over a year and a half earlier, and Horus had moved on to other conquests. The weapons were stored on Diamat, only to be claimed 50 years later, when Horus revealed his betrayal at Istvan III and sent forces to retrieve the siege engines for his attempt to overthrow the Emperor. Assault on Dahinta. On Dahinta, the Lunar Wolves fought against self-aware machines called the Overseers, led by an artificial intelligence known as the Archdroid. The Emperor had long decreed that no sentient machines could exist, as they had nearly caused humanity's extinction during the Dark Age of technology. Despite heavy casualties, the Lunar Wolves exterminated the thinking machines. It was later discovered that the Overseers had been created by a vanished offshoot of humanity that had settled on Dahinta, caring for their masters' crumbling cities long after they had become extinct or left the world. Battle of Gyros Thravian. This massive joint Imperial compliance action involved the Lunar Wolves, Death Guard, and Imperial Fists legions against the powerful Orc warboss Garkul Blackfang. Despite their strength, the Imperial forces were nearly defeated until the Emperor himself intervened aboard his flagship Bucephalus, leading 1,000 Legio Custodes into battle. The Emperor confronted and killed Blackfang atop his Gargant, while the Custodians laid waste to the Orc horde, slaying over 100,000 Orcs with only 3 Custodians lost. The Emperor commemorated the Custodians' sacrifice by engraving the names of the 3 fallen Custodians onto his personal power armor. Pacification of Shravan. This joint Imperial compliance action by the Lunar Wolves, Iron Warriors, Imperial Fists and Emperor's Children legions targeted the Xenos Badoon on Shravan. The Iron Warriors won a significant victory by storming the Badoon's final refuge and holding the breach while the other legions carried the city. During the victory feast, Horus proclaimed Perturabo the greatest master of siege warfare in the Great Crusade. Fulgrim, Primarch of the Emperor's Children, inquired whether Dawn believed the defences of the Imperial Palace could withstand the Iron Warriors, to which Dawn replied affirmatively if the defence was well planned. Perturabo's rage at this response led to a rift between him and Dawn, resulting in their legions rarely serving together for the remainder of the Great Crusade. Discovery of Primarch Alpharius Omegon. Accounts state that the Alpha Legion Primarch Alpharius was discovered accidentally by the Lunar Wolves after they were lured into a trap by a distress beacon from one of their battleships. Horus's flagship came under attack by an unknown enemy, and a single assassin broke into the flagship and reached Horus's command chamber. Horus confronted the attacker but recognized him as his lost brother Alpharius. The validity of this account is highly suspect, but it remains a notable part of the Alpha Legion's enigmatic history. Compliance of Melchior. The Imperial Compliance of Melchior was a joint campaign conducted by the 16th Legion and the Blood Angels Legion. Melchior was the final stronghold of the Nephilim, hulking Xenos entities of humanoid shape with smooth, soapstone-like surfaces. Their dome-shaped heads lacked necks, and their skulls were ringed with olfactory slits and eye spots. In the light, the Nephilim appeared as if made of blown glass, their semi-transparent flesh glowing. They moved with a slow, careful agility, resembling sea creatures in a glass tank, but could dart and spin quickly when needed. The Nephilim had left a trail of destruction across 100 worlds before settling on Melchior. Planets like Sagan, the Decora Spine, Orpheo Minoris and Beta Rigel II were stripped of human life, with populations herded into empath chapels and consumed. Named after fallen seraphs from ancient human mythology, the Nephilim used those they preyed upon to do their soldiering, luring the vulnerable with promises of godhood. They implanted parts of themselves into their thralls, controlling minds either through sheer will or the weak character of their victims. This was a direct affront desiccated to the Emperor's vision of a rational, secular galaxy. Reports from the Blood Angels and Lunar Wolves scout marines revealed horrifying scenes of empty chapels piled with corpses, victims drained of their essence. The Primarchs, disgusted by the true nature of their enemy, devised a plan to break the Nephilim's will. Horus and Sanguinius decided on a display of overwhelming force. The Blood Angels would march alongside the Lunar Wolves, presenting an unstoppable army that would roll over the Nephilim's last bastion. Horus and the Lunar Wolves met the Nephilim on the sparkling white plains of the Silver Desert. Horus attempted a final parley, but the Nephilim refused to capitulate. With lightning speed, ceramite drop pods rained from the sky, accompanied by Stormbird and Thunderhawk gunships carrying companies of the 9th Legion. The swift assault drew the Nephilim forces away from their defences, leaving them vulnerable. The Blood Angels struck with brutal efficiency, breaking and cutting down the Nephilim. The Xenos were ultimately put to the sword, crushed between two Space Marine legions on the sands of Melchior. Olanor Crusade. The Olanor Crusade was an extensive Imperial assault against the Orc Empire led by Overlord Urlak Uruk during the Great Crusade of the early 31st millennium. The final assault took place on the capital world in the Olanor system within the Olanor sector, which had long been dominated by Urlak Uruk's Greenskin Empire. The Crusade saw the deployment of 100,000 Space Marines, 8 million Imperial Army troops, and thousands of Imperial starships and support personnel. The Lunar Wolves spearheaded the assault into the heart of Urlak's fortress palace. During the climax of the battle, Horus, accompanied by a retinue of Lunar Wolves Terminators from the elite First Company, confronted the massive Orc warlord and his 40 Orc nobs. Horus charged into the nobs, cutting them down with his lightning claws until he finally faced the Overlord. Urlak was no match for Horus's skill and power. After crippling his enemy, Horus threw Urlak's broken body from the palace battlements, causing panic among the greenskin forces. The Orcs began to flee, only to find themselves trapped as the Lunar Wolves had already breached the outer walls, turning the retreat into a massacre. In the Overlord's chamber, Horus discovered every Orc and Terminator dead, except for the gore-drenched first captain of the First Company, Ezekiel Abaddon, who stood surrounded by crushed Orc bodies. The Olanor Crusade marked the pinnacle of the Great Crusade's efforts to reunite humanity's scattered colony worlds. The Orcs of Olanor represented the largest concentration of Orcs ever defeated by the Imperium's military forces before the Third War for Armageddon in the late 41st millennium. Following this victory, the Emperor of Mankind returned to Terra to work on his project to open the Elder Webway for humanity. In his place, he left Horus to command the Great Crusade's vast forces. Horus was elevated to the rank of Imperial War Master, given command authority over all the Primarchs and every expeditionary fleet. However, the Primarchs struggled with the Emperor's absence, feeling abandoned as he pursued a secret project without revealing its purpose to his sons. This discontent planted the seeds of corruption that would eventually grow into the Horus heresy. To honor the great victory at Olanor, the Emperor decreed that the Lunar Wolves should be renamed the Sons of Horus, recognizing their Primarch's exceptional deeds. Yet, with typical humility, Horus chose not to rename his legion at that time. Subjugation of the Akum Sothos cluster, initially brought into compliance by the Lunar Wolves early in the Great Crusade, mysteriously rebelled against Imperial rule due to the influence of controlling Xenos. Horus devised a plan to overthrow the unsighted kings. The Xenos-possessed leaders of the rebellion, through a swift and decisive campaign that would eliminate the insurgents while preserving the cluster's infrastructure for future repopulation. The plan called for the combined might of 4 legions: the Lunar Wolves, Space Wolves, Iron Warriors, and Raven Guard, to converge on the heavily fortified lair of the unsighted kings for a final overwhelming assault. Despite his reservations, Corax complied and assigned the majority of his Terran-born veterans of the old 19th Legion, especially those who readily agreed with the War Master's plans, as the vanguard of the assault. At the height of the battle, with the assault companies suffering heavy casualties and the attack faltering under intense fire, Corax personally led a desperate charge. His battle cry rallied the Legion to such efforts that they breached the defences and took Gate 42. The honour of slaying the unsighted kings was claimed by Horus as War Master. With their execution, the Xenos' control over the population was broken, and the Akum Sothos cluster was reclaimed. However, the cost was significant. Thousands of Raven Guard, mostly Terran-born, sacrificed their lives before the shattered walls of Gate 42. Compliance of 6319. The compliance of 6319 took place in the 203rd year of the Great Crusade. The Lunar Wolves' 63rd Expeditionary Fleet, forced off course by a warp storm, stumbled upon a system of 9 planets orbiting a yellow sun. Upon entering the system, they were contacted by a technologically advanced human society on the 3rd planet, ruled by a self-proclaimed Emperor of Mankind, who claimed to be the rightful ruler of humanity across the galaxy. He invited the Imperial delegation to pay fealty. Horus sent Captain Hastur Sejanus and his Glory Squad to meet this Emperor. Initial negotiations seemed smooth but broke down when Captain Sejanus suggested the existence of another true Emperor. This perceived insult led to Sejanus and his men being ambushed and killed. Horus, deeply grieved but miraculously restrained, did not order immediate retaliation. Instead, he prepared an Astartes spear-tip unit for assault and sent Malaghurst with another delegation. This mission ended in disaster when Malaghurst's Stormbird was shot down. A fleet of over 600 warships from the planet challenged the 63rd Expeditionary Fleet, leading to a great naval battle where the Imperial fleet ultimately prevailed. The ground assault was led by First Captain Ezekiel Abaddon and supported by Titans and assault craft. The Lunar Wolves breached the capital city's defences and fought their way to the palace. The false Emperor offered to surrender, but only to the overall commander. Captain Gaviel Loken realized this was a trap to assassinate Horus. First Company Captain Carlos Ekadon killed the impostor, but the real false Emperor then revealed himself, nearly defeating Loken, Ekadon and their squad. Horus teleported into the throne room and killed the false Emperor with a single shot. With the false Emperor dead, the main resistance on 6319 collapsed, though some military elements continued guerrilla warfare. These were eventually eliminated by the Byzant Janizar's Imperial Army Regiment. The last significant resistance occurred in the Whisperhead Mountains, where Captain Loken's 10th Company fought for 3 months. They discovered primitive shrines connected to the worship of a being called Samus, a minor demonic warp entity. Samus possessed a sergeant, killing over a dozen Astartes and several remembrances before being destroyed by Captain Loken and Sergeant Nero Vipus. This incident was the first recorded encounter with the malefic powers of chaos and was classified by Horus to hide the possibility of Astartes corruption. General Rachris of the Byzant Janizars was appointed governor of the compliant world, and Peter Egan Momus oversaw the adaptation of its infrastructure to imperial standards. 63-19 was the first world recorded by the newly arrived remembrances of the 63rd expedition, documenting the Lunar Wolves' exploits. Compliance of 140, 20, Urisarak, murder. The compliance action on Urisarak, officially designated 140-20, but informally known as murder by the Astartes, occurred in the 203rd year of the Great Crusade. The 140th Expeditionary Fleet, part of the 9th Legionis Astartes, the Blood Angels, under the command of Captain Kitas Frome, encountered this death world. Misinterpreting the satellite beacons left by the advanced human civilization known as the Interex, which warned of a dangerous Xenos species quarantined there, Captain Frome ordered a landing operation. The planet's extreme atmospheric turbulence scattered the Blood Angels' assault craft, isolating the landing parties and disrupting Vox communications. The ground team soon sent fragmented transmissions reporting encounters with a hostile intelligent arachnoid species later identified as the Megarachnids. These aliens, an old enemy of the Interex, had been exiled to Urisarak. The Interex had stripped them of their interstellar capabilities and erected weather control devices to create atmospheric disturbances, deterring other species from landing. As reports of horrific combat continued, it became clear the Xenos were too numerous and formidable to defeat without reinforcements. The Blood Angels sent distress calls for immediate extraction. The last message from Captain Kitas Frome stating, "This world is murder," gave the planet its informal name. A company from the 3rd Legion, the Emperor's Children, responded to the distress call, but faced the same issues, suffering heavy casualties due to the atmospheric disturbances. Just as they were about to be overwhelmed, Lunar Wolves Astartes from the War Master Horus's 63rd Expeditionary Fleet arrived, scattering the Megarachnids and initiating a full-scale assault. The Lunar Wolves, joined by remnants of the Emperor's Children, tens of thousands of Imperial army soldiers from the Byzant Janizars, and several Legio Mortis Titans, began systematically destroying the atmosphere-altering trees and eroding the planet's atmospheric barrier. Commanding the assault from the vengeful spirit, Horus was pleased with the progress. A proper landing zone had been established and an extraction was considered. However, the unexpected arrival of Primarch Sanguinius, who sought vengeance for his fallen Blood Angels, changed the plan. With tears in his eyes, Sanguinius asked Horus to join him in avenging the dead, to which Horus replied, "Yes, let us murder." Reinforced by 5 companies of Blood Angels, Sanguinius and Horus led the assault against the Megarachnids. Thousands of the Xenos poured out to defend their territory, but despite their relentless attacks, they continued to lose ground. By the 6th month, the Megarachnids faced imminent extinction when a fleet from the Interex arrived to investigate the assault on their reservation world. Recognizing the importance of establishing contact with the advanced humans of the Interex, Horus ended the campaign against the Megarachnids, sparing them from extinction once again. The ultimate fate of the Megarachnids following the outbreak of the Horus heresy remains unrecorded in Imperial history. Interex compliance. The Interex were a highly advanced human civilization allied with various Xenos races, including the ape-like Kinnebrach. Their technology surpassed even the Imperium's at its peak in many ways. The 63rd Expeditionary Fleet first encountered the Interex on their world of Zenobia during the Great Crusade. Devoted to combating chaos, which they called Chaos, the Interex were suspicious of the Imperium, fearing that the visitors from Terra might be servants of the ruinous powers. While Horus and his Mournival were negotiating with the Interex leaders, First Chaplain Erebus of the Word-Bearers, secretly a follower of the Chaos Gods, infiltrated the Hall of Devices on Zenobia. This museum housed various artifacts and weapons from the Interex and their alien allies. Erebus's goal was to steal a deadly Kynabrak blade known as an anatheme, a chaotic artifact sacred to Nurgle, the plague god. After securing the blade, Erebus rigged the building to explode to cover his escape. Believing the Imperium to be agents of chaos due to the theft of the anatheme, the Interex troops immediately attacked Horus's forces, igniting a deadly confrontation. The War Master was evacuated by his Astartes, and the Lunar Wolves retaliated with their full might against the Interex. The anatheme later played a crucial role in Horus's corruption by the Dark Gods on Davin's moon. Following these events, the Imperium launched a campaign that ultimately destroyed the Interex and brought all their worlds into Imperial compliance. Battle of Davin's Moon. 60 Terran years after Davin was brought into Imperial compliance, Horus, influenced by the Word-Bearer's first chaplain Erebus, returned to the feral planet. Erebus informed the Primarch that Imperial Governor Yugen Temba had renounced his oaths to the Imperium and had fallen from the Emperor's light. According to Erebus, Temba had found the tribes on Davin's moon resistant to Imperial rule, leading an occupying force to the moon to bring them into compliance. However, during a parley, Temba and his men were struck by a sorcerous attack, turning them away from the Imperium and into the service of chaos, specifically the plague god Nurgle. Horus led a combined assault force of Lunar Wolves, an Imperial army regiment of Byzant Janizars, and a detachment of Titans from the Legio Mortis onto the moon's surface. They discovered the wreck of Temba's flagship, the Glory of Terra, now a derelict. Nearby, they found a mass grave of rotting Imperial army bodies in the swamp, seemingly confirming the death of Temba and his men. However, these corpses, reanimated by Nurgle's power as plague zombies, emerged to attack the Imperial forces. The Lunar Wolves and Byzant Janizars swiftly dealt with the undead. Horus then led a spearhead assault into the derelict ship, where Captain Verulam Moy of the 19th Company encountered the bloated mutant form of Temba. Temba, now a servant of Nurgle, attempted to convert Moy to chaos, but killed him when he refused. Horus confronted the corrupted Temba, who was armed with the Kynabrak anatheme, a Xenos weapon sacred to Nurgle that had been stolen from the Interex by Erebus. This weapon, crafted to be a nemesis to its target, gave Temba preternatural skill and speed. During their fierce battle, Temba wounded Horus with the anatheme. Despite the injury, Horus ultimately subdued and mortally wounded Temba. As Nurgle's influence left him, Temba warned Horus of the entities in the warp and foretold a grim future of endless war and the Emperor's living death. Temba died, his soul consumed by the warp. The wounded Horus was taken back to his flagship, but soon fell ill from the anatheme's effects. Beyond the apothecary's ability to heal, Horus was brought to Davin's surface to be healed at the Temple of the Serpent Lodge. Persuaded by Erebus, the sons of Horus violated the imperial truth by seeking aid from the Davinite priests, who were actually a chaos cult. Using forbidden sorcery, the cultists played on Horus's jealousy and resentment towards the Emperor, corrupting him. Magnus the Red, Primarch of the Thousand Sons, used his sorcery to intervene and reveal Erebus's manipulations. However, Horus's descent into chaos could not be stopped as he succumbed to his feelings of jealousy and bitterness. Emerging from the temple fully healed but changed, Horus was now infused with the power of chaos. Upon recovery, Horus accepted the Emperor's offer to rename the Lunar Wolves as the Sons of Horus. With the help of his legion's warrior Lodge and Erebus, he plotted to overthrow the Emperor and purge the 16th Legion of loyalist elements, setting the stage for the greatest betrayal in human history. Destruction of the Orician technocracy. Shortly after Horus's miraculous recovery on Davin, the newly renamed Sons of Horus encountered the Orician technocracy on the world of Aureus during the Great Crusade. This human civilization, founded during mankind's early exploration of the stars in the Dark Age of technology, had developed similarly to the Imperium, particularly resembling the Mechanicus of Mars. Horus and a contingent of Sons of Horus Astartes met the technocracy's leader, the Fabricator Consul, for diplomatic talks aboard the landing bay of the Vengeful Spirit. During their initial discussion, Horus discovered that the technocracy possessed highly coveted Lost Standard Template Construct (STC) technology. Upon learning this, the War Master turned his combi bolter on the Fabricator Consul and executed him. He then ordered his men to annihilate the Fabricator Consul's personal guard, the Brotherhood, who used power armor and weapons similar to those of the Space Marines. Unbeknownst to most of the Legion, the corruption had begun to spread shortly after Horus made his dark bargain with the ruinous powers. The official explanation for the Sons of Horus's actions was that the staff accompanying the Fabricator Consul aboard the 16th Legion's flagship possessed a weapon intended to assassinate the War Master. This triggered a conflict with the Orician technocracy, lasting over 6 bloody months. The World Eaters, alongside the Sons of Horus, fought on Orius, with their Primarch Angron personally leading the final assault on the Iron Citadel held by the Brotherhood. When the blood-maddened World Eaters' assault companies stormed a breach in the walls, the Brotherhood detonated charges, burying the warriors under thousands of tons of rubble. Angron tore his way free, butchering the remaining Brotherhood warriors with his monstrous chain glaive. Ephraim Guardia, the senior preceptor of the Brotherhood Chapter Command and Castellan of the Iron Citadel, died in the first seconds of Angron's attack. The campaign was brutal, as the Brotherhood used advanced power armor suits similar to those of the Legiones Astartes. However, they were eventually defeated, and their technology was requisitioned by the 16th Legion. Horus used the seized Orician STC databases to entice a faction of the Adeptus Mechanicus to join his rebellion against the Emperor. These traitors eventually formed the core of what became the Dark Mechanicus, and their treachery unleashed the terrible civil war within the Mechanicus, known as the Schism of Mars. Cleansing of Ariata. The cleansing of Ariata was an Imperial compliance action conducted by the Lunar Wolves, Ultramarines, and World Eaters legions. Ariata, a technologically advanced world, had been isolated from humanity for centuries. When Imperial envoys arrived with news of the Emperor and the Imperial truth, they were executed as a bloody gesture of the planet's independence. Due to Ariata's formidable military might, its pacification was assigned to War Master Horus and 2 other Space Marine legions under his command. Most of the planet was quickly conquered, except for a massive fortress where the planet's leaders had taken refuge. Eager to move on, Horus commanded Angron, the Primarch of the World Eaters, to assault the citadel and kill only the figureheads. Angron eagerly led the assault. However, the fortress was heavily defended, resulting in horrendous casualties, with a dozen World Eaters falling for each meter gained. Eventually, a ramp of corpses led to a single breach in the wall, and the enraged Astartes of the World Eaters Legion stormed in. Filled with fury over their fallen brothers, the World Eaters were merciless. By the time the Ultramarines arrived, the battle was nearly over. The interior of the fortress was filled with the dismembered and mangled corpses of the defenders, as not a single soul was spared the vengeful wrath of the World Eaters. It was an absolute slaughter, with the fortress transformed into an abattoir of human blood. Disgusted by this savagery, the Ultramarines reported the World Eaters' growing barbarism to the Emperor. However, Horus, already influenced by the temptations of chaos, saw the World Eaters' savagery as a perfect match for the service of Khorne, especially for their rage-fueled Primarch, Angron. Istvan III atrocity. The Istvan III atrocity began when the Imperial planetary governor of Istvan III, Vardus Pral, was corrupted by the chaos god Slanesh, whose cultists had long been active on the world even before its conquest by the Imperium. Declaring independence from the Imperium, Pral practiced forbidden Slaneshi sorcery. The Council of Terra tasked Horus with retaking the world, primarily its capital, the Choral City. This order played directly into Horus's scheme to overthrow the Emperor. Despite the fact that the 4 legions under Horus's command, the Sons of Horus, World Eaters, Death Guard, and Emperor's Children, had already pledged themselves to chaos, each still contained loyalist elements, mostly Terran-born Space Marines directly recruited by the Emperor before reuniting with their Primarchs during the Great Crusade. Horus, under the guise of quelling the rebellion on Istvan III, gathered his forces in the Istvan system, devising a plan to eliminate these loyalists. After a prolonged bombardment of Istvan III, Horus dispatched all known loyalist Astartes to the planet under the pretense of reclaiming it for the Imperium. Upon capturing the Choral City, the planetary capital, these Astartes were betrayed. A cascade of life-eater virus bombs was launched from Horus's orbiting fleet, resulting in what became known as the Istvan III atrocity. Captain Saul Tarvitz of the Emperor's Children, aboard his legion's flagship Andronius, discovered the plot, and with help from battle captain Nathaniel Garrow of the Death Guard on the frigate Eisenstein, reached the surface to warn the loyalists. Despite the warning, 12 billion civilians perished almost instantly from the flesh-dissolving life-eater virus. The psychic shock of their mass deaths briefly obscured the Astronomicon beacon. When the virus bombs failed to eliminate all loyalists, World Eater's Primarch, Angron, enraged, led 50 companies of traitor marines in a frenzied assault on the planet. Discarding tactics and strategy, they indulged in mindless slaughter, fueled by their growing allegiance to Khorne. Horus, though frustrated by the delay, reinforced Angron with troops from the Sons of Horus, Death Guard and Emperor's Children. Captain Garrow and a contingent of loyalists managed to escape Istvan III aboard the damaged frigate Eisenstein, fleeing to Terra to warn the Emperor of Horus's treachery. Meanwhile, on Istvan III, loyalists under Captains Tarvitz, Garviel Loken and Tarik Torgarden valiantly resisted their traitorous brethren. Despite some initial successes that delayed Horus's plans for 3 months, their lack of air support and Titan firepower doomed their cause. During the battle, Sons of Horus captains Ezekiel Abaddon and Horus Aximund confronted their former Mournival brothers, Loken and Torgarden. Aximund beheaded Torgarden, but Abaddon failed to kill Loken when their building collapsed. Loken survived to witness the final orbital bombardment that ended the Loyalists' defense. Captain Lucius of the 13th Company of the Emperor's Children betrayed the Loyalists to prove his loyalty to Lord Commander Eidolon and Primarch Fulgrim. Lucius's treachery resulted in the personal slaying of many Loyalists and his acceptance back into the Emperor's Children as a champion of Slaanesh. In the end, the remaining Loyalists, reduced to a few hundred, retreated to their last bastion. Horus, tired of the conflict, ordered his men to withdraw and had the remains of the Choral City bombarded into dust from orbit. The Dropsite massacre on Istvan V was a pivotal and infamous battle during the Horus heresy. Following the virus bombing of the Traitor Legion's loyalist elements on Istvan III, Warmaster Horus redeployed his forces to Istvan V. Upon learning of Horus's treachery, the Emperor dispatched 7 loyalist Space Marine legions to bring Horus to justice. The Iron Hands, Salamanders and Raven Guard led the first wave of the assault, but were repelled by Horus's chaos-tainted forces, whose superior tactics proved overwhelming. In the initial phase of the battle, the Sons of Horus focused on defense, holding the core and heavily fortified bastions and pushing the Imperial army before them into the Loyalists' line of fire. One notable exception was the deployment of their Reaver and Assault companies to counter the Raven Guard's strike units in the maze of ravines and rockfalls flanking the Urgal Depression. When the second wave of the attack called in Loyalist reserves, it was revealed that the 4 Space Marine legions comprising them, the Iron Warriors, Alpha Legion, Word-Bearers and Night Lords, had also secretly turned traitor, swearing allegiance to Horus and Chaos. As the tide of the battle shifted, the Sons of Horus launched a full-scale attack against the battered Loyalists, with Horus personally leading the charge. The 3 Loyalist legions were nearly annihilated in the ensuing crossfire. However, several thousand survivors from each legion managed to escape off-world, though they were too decimated to play a significant role in defending the Imperium against Horus's forces. The civil war that followed plunged the entire Imperium into chaos. The taint of betrayal spread far beyond the legions aligned with Horus. The Imperial army was divided, with regiments and fleets turning on each other. The Titan legions of the Mechanicus were similarly affected, leading to half of the Emperor's forces being locked in brutal conflict with their former allies. Nearly every world in the Imperium was touched by the war, which raged for 7 standard years and claimed countless billions of lives. This protracted and devastating conflict ultimately culminated in Horus's assault on Terra itself. Destruction of Dwell. Horus arrived on the world of Dwell, settled during the dark age of technology, by colonists from the nearby night world of Molech. The War Master sought to access the ancient repository on Dwell containing information that would guide him back to Molech, where he had unknowingly participated in an Imperial compliance campaign decades earlier and had his memories suppressed by the Emperor. After the infamous campaign on Istvan IV, the sons of Horus needed to recover their losses. The deaths of loyalists Garviel Loken and Tarik Torgaden on Istvan III left vacancies in the Mournival, prompting Captain Horus Aximand to propose to First Captain Ezekiel Abaddon that they select 2 new members. After much debate, they agreed on Falcus Kibre, commander of the Catulan Reaver Squad, and Sergeant Grail Noctua. Rumours of Horus's actions in the Istvan system spread, sparking fierce reprisals in the Momed, Instar and Okoth sectors. Shadrach Medicine, a leader of the Iron Hands Iron Tenth and a war leader of the Sorgol clan, rallied loyalists against the traitors of the 63rd Expeditionary Fleet. Arriving too late to stand with his Primarch Ferrus Manus at Istvan V, Medicine gathered 58 Imperial Army battalions, war hosts from the Momed Voidhives, a flotilla of siege hulks from Nahan Instar, a half-broken cadre of Salamanders Astartes, Mechanicus Claves, and a White Scars raid force rerouted from the Kondax warfront. Medicine fortified the world of Dwell, with its fortified cities, orbital batteries, ship schools, and 8 million pinnacle-grade fighting men, making it the cornerstone of his defensive line. He positioned himself at the Mausoletic Precinct on a high plateau overlooking Taijun and the Sea of Enna. The Sons of Horus launched a planetary assault, slaughtering the human loyalist defenders, but were surprised by the ad hoc loyalist Astartes force secretly fortifying the system. During the assault, Horus Aximand killed Medicine's second-in-command, Iron Hands Lieutenant Bion Henrikos, but was then attacked by a White Scars kill formation disguised as statues. Captain Hebu Khan of the White Scars led the loyalist counterattack, but was quickly driven off with the arrival of Sons of Horus reinforcements. Aximand was gravely wounded by a White Scars warrior who sliced off his face. The Legion's apothecaries reattached Aximand's face, leaving a scar that made him look more brutal and reflected the growing corruption within him. Having survived Arisak, one of Shadrach Medicine's shattered Legion cells launched a daring assassination attempt on War Master Horus at Dwell. With Fulgrim and Mortarion by his side, Horus prevailed. Realizing the true threat, he granted Tybalt Mar permission to take any action necessary to eradicate the shattered legions. Battle of Molech. Horus, commanding both the Sons of Horus and the Death Guard legions, spearheaded the invasion of the fortress world of Molech. Having regained some of his memories from a previous campaign decades earlier, Horus discovered the existence of a concealed warp portal that led into the realm of chaos. Desiring this power for himself, he launched a massive assault on the unsuspecting world. At the peak of the conflict, Nighthouse Divine betrayed the Imperium, siding with the invading forces and dooming the defenders. Malcador secretly dispatched the elite Knights-Errant, a covert order of loyalist agents, to Molech to pave the way for a direct assault by the Space Wolves on the War Master's flagship. After traversing the portal into the realm of chaos and securing the full blessings of the ruinous powers, Horus emerged nearly invincible. Only a small number of Knights-Errant managed to escape, bringing the grim news of Horus's newfound strength back to Terra. Siege of Terra. 7 years after the betrayal at Istvan III, the Horus heresy approached its tragic end as loyalist legions, not already defending Terra, raced through the warp towards the cradle of humanity. Simultaneously, the traitor legions amassed above Terra, preparing to assault the Imperial palace. The Siege of Terra marked the climactic battle of the Horus heresy, pitting the forces of chaos, led by Warmaster Horus, against the loyalist armies of the Imperium, commanded by the Emperor of Mankind himself. The loyalist forces barely managed to defend the Imperial palace, and the battle reached its zenith when the Emperor confronted Horus on the deck of his massive battle barge, the Vengeful Spirit. The Emperor unleashed his full psychic power, ultimately slaying Horus but suffering mortal wounds in the process. The Emperor had to be interred within the life support mechanisms of the Golden Throne, a piece of advanced psychic augmentation technology. The Siege of Terra's outcome shaped humanity's destiny for the next 10,000 years. In the aftermath, the traitor host began a fighting withdrawal. Amidst the chaos, Horus's body was recovered by his legion from his flagship. The 16th Legion, having fought their way clear of the Sol system, fled to the Eye of Terra. There the sons of Horus established a fortress world that served as both the tomb of their lost Primarch and a base for launching further attacks against both their fellow traitor legions and the Imperium. Thus began the long war of the forces of chaos to overthrow the Corpse Emperor. With Horus slain, First Captain Ezekiel Abaddon emerged as the Warmaster's heir. Abaddon, soon known as Abaddon the Despoiler, took command of the sons of Horus and the remnants of the splintering forces of chaos. He renamed the sons of Horus the Black Legion and declared himself the new Warmaster of Chaos Undivided. Highly favoured by the Chaos gods, Abaddon intended to complete Horus's task: to see the Emperor slain and the Imperium crushed under the boots of the 16th Legion. Slave Wars, the Legion War. In the aftermath of their campaigns against the Imperium during the Heresy, the 16th Legion used captured slaves to construct a massive fortress on the demon world of Malium. Within this fortress they entombed the corpse of their slain Warmaster, Horus. However, the stability of this stronghold was short-lived, as the Eye of Terra slave wars erupted. The Emperor's Children Legion launched a surprise assault on Malium, devastating the sons of Horus's fortress and stealing Horus's corpse. The corrupted apothecary Fabius Bile sought to clone the dead Warmaster of Chaos to restore the forces of Chaos's fortunes after their defeat by the Imperium. During this period, Abaddon the Despoiler returned to lead his forces in recovering Horus's corpse. After successfully defeating the Emperor's children and shattering the once proud legion into disorganized, hedonistic warbands, the sons of Horus retrieved their former leader's body. Abaddon returned it to Malium and had it destroyed to prevent any future cloning attempts. This decisive action led Abaddon to a revelation. Horus had failed because he was a weak fool, unable to complete his task of slaying the Emperor and seizing control of the galaxy for the Dark Gods. Abaddon vowed to succeed where Horus had failed, proclaiming himself the new Warmaster of Chaos. He ordered the sons of Horus to repaint their Viridian power armor black, symbolizing mourning and vengeance. He also abandoned the 16th Legion's former name, declaring them the Black Legion. With this transformation, the Black Legion abandoned the ruins of their fortress on Malium and chose to become a fleet-based legion, establishing scattered holdings across the Eye of Terra.